Welcome to Oxford Medical Summaries. My name is Dr. Aziz. I work as a doctor in the UK. I work in both emergency medicine and also in general practice, otherwise known as family medicine. I've also at times had to be one of the unofficial expedition doctors on various treks that we've participated in, for example, at Everest and Kilimanjaro. So the aim of this channel would be to primarily cover the Oxford Medical Handbooks. Now, these are probably the leading medical textbooks in the world, and certainly Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine, I think, has been around for 25, 30 years. And again, so this we'll be covering various topics. Initially, we'll be beginning with the Oxford Handbook of Expedition and Wilderness Medicine. I think this particular book would be suitable, all the topics certainly covered would be suitable not just for healthcare professionals, but also people who are generally interested in expedition. You probably would have done some basic first aid courses. And one of the aims certainly of this channel would be to make the topics as amenable as possible, jargon-free, not just, you don't necessarily have to have a medical or a healthcare background. So let's get started. Today we'll be aiming to cover chapter 1, which is pretty much an introduction to expedition and wilderness medicine. Now, what is this book essentially about, and what exactly is expedition and wilderness medicine? So wilderness medicine or expedition medicine, and we'll explain why there are different terms, is essentially about the healthcare of travelers to remote areas. Remote areas are defined as places where access to sophisticated medical services is either difficult or impossible, and the responsibility for dealing with medical problems falls on the expedition members, whether they are lay people or healthcare professionals. Now, in terms of the terminology, in Europe, this branch of medicine is usually called expedition medicine, while in North America it is called wilderness medicine. Now, the introduction goes on to cover various points about different types of groups that travel to remote areas, which can include well-organized and funded expeditions, where we're talking about going into the hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars, small groups of independent travelers, commercial trips to remote destinations, gap year travelers, students who are essentially backpacking, and again, with money, age has become less of a factor. We have people in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s going all the way to the top of Everest. Yuichiro Miura, I believe in 2013, got to the top of Everest at the age of 80.
Japanese adventurer Yuichiro Miura has reached the top of Mount Everest at the age of 80. He is the oldest person to climb the world's highest peak.
In Nepal on May 16th. He climbed several difficult sections. These included the ice wall at the head of a crumbling glacier and the icy wall of the Lhotse face. On Thursday, Miura set out from a camp at an altitude of 8,500 meters for the final stretch. Around 12:15 Japan time, Miura reached the summit of the 8,848-meter mountain. Miura's achievement at the age of 80 has encouraged the young and the elderly.
Certainly very interesting and inspirational stuff there. And if you read other reports, Yuichiro Miura actually went up with a team, as you would expect, but also there was a cardiologist and another doctor in his team, and so that was an interesting observation. And again, apparently he's planning to do the same again at the age of 90, which would be in a couple of years from now. That would be certainly interesting. So then again, the book goes on to explain what expedition medicine is about. So one of 4 key points it touches upon are preparing for an expedition, which would be to minimize ill health and maximize expedition achievements, working during the expedition in a professional capacity to diagnose, treat and manage health problems as best as possible out in the field, managing expedition emergencies and potential evacuations should the need arise, and finally advising on health issues once the expedition has returned home. And there are various aspects to the medical care of an expedition which takes time, and they can include tasks such as team selection, first aid training, preventative medicine, both before departure and in the field, organization of a suitable medical kit. Again, you want to take as much as possible, but you have to be realistic as to how much you can take to remote destinations or to high altitude. Knowing about particular health problems in the area of the visit, knowing about the health issues of those within the group that you're traveling with, arrangements for medical backup and evacuation, and organization of medical insurance. So the introductory chapter then goes on to elaborate on where the likely destinations are of expeditions. Again, the majority of people will travel to mountainous regions. That accounts for 41% of all expeditions. The next largest category is tropical. So again, these are areas near the equator. That accounts for 33%. And then we have, again, smaller regions, categories such as deserts and polar, 8% freshwater. So we then go on to what kind of illnesses travelers experience during expeditions. Again, we'll go into these obviously in much more detail as we work through the book and the various different topics. But just as a general overview, we can see the distribution in this chart. Again, 30% of illnesses that are experienced on expeditions are gastrointestinal. So again, we're talking about things like diarrhea, vomiting, and often many of these are self-limiting, but some of them, if they do progress to become serious, can lead to dehydration and hospitalization. Dysentery, cholera, Gardis can infect those who are not very familiar with these illnesses. And with a lot of these, simple hygiene measures can reduce or minimize the problem. But again, we as a group, it's essential that you carry basic remedies and ensure that hydration is kept to an optimum level should anyone experience any gastrointestinal problems. Medical problems account for the next largest category, 21%. And when we say medical problems, we're referring to things like respiratory infections, headaches, simple ailments such as that. So one of the things when you first start working in a hospital, I remember as a junior doctor, I was like, hang on, there's a medical team? Isn't everything medical? Essentially, medical refers to respiratory, cardiovascular, neurological, and then you have the surgical topics such as severe abdominal pain, orthopedic, which actually accounts. So orthopedic is the next one, 19%. So again, we're talking about problems with joints, so sprains and back strains, simple things like ankle sprains are very common. But again, rest and simple painkillers usually help with these ailments. Fractures and more serious trauma will certainly require evacuation. And again, there are a whole host of other problems. So again, we're talking about environmental. Again, with high altitude climbing, where we have to serious consideration is altitude sickness. And again, we will certainly go into more in depth in that as we progress. Now, an interesting point is that overall, as time has progressed and as technology and our learning and understanding and safety measures have improved over the years and decades, the number of, or proportion rather, of illnesses and accidents have certainly decreased throughout time. Now, one of the issues and one of the things that is actually mentioned in this book, even in the introduction, in the introductory chapter, is that deaths on an expedition are often more sensationalized in the media and more highlighted and therefore more prevalent. A great example of this is the 1996 tragedy on Everest, which was hugely sensationalized we had the book Into Thin Air, and then by John Krakauer, and then the movie, I believe by the same name, the following year, and then the blockbuster movie in 2015, which focused on the tragic deaths of, I think it was 8 people in that climbing season. One of the survivors was actually someone called Charlotte Fox, as we can see here. And the interesting part to this is that she did survive, and she actually passed away in 2018, believe it or not, in a simple fall in her home. And again, that didn't receive much traction, certainly nothing in magnitude compared to what her climbing colleagues experienced in 1996. Now, as mentioned, the expeditions generally are getting safer. We had, back, for example, in the 18th and 19th century, we had entire expeditions just often seemingly disappearing off the face of the earth. Famously, in the 1800s, Sir John Franklin's Arctic voyage just disappeared. And the consequences of that and what happened with the survivors, actually, there were no survivors eventually. It was found out, but what happened to them wasn't found out for many years. And an example we can give statistically is between 1943 and 1983, according to the British Antarctic Survey, 26 staff died. And from 1983 onwards, up to the point of the publication of this book, only one person had died. So certainly things are improving. And again, statistically, if we look at the death rate, for example, on Everest, we see back in 96, the fatality percentage was 12.2%. Again, as mentioned earlier, that was a year that was highlighted as being particularly bad. But even if we look at the percentages in 1997, 1998, 8.2%, 3.3%, and if you compare it relatively to what it is now, even until 2019, which was highlighted as a very bad year, the percentage fatality rate of those attempting Everest was actually 1.2%. The overall numbers may increase because more people are attempting the summit, and we also have to take into account that more and more older people are attempting summits. But in spite of that, the overall safety is improving, as you can see by these statistics here. So just want to end on this nice quote at the end of the chapter, which says, "Expeditions are getting safer, but society is less tolerant of risk. Death occurs on expeditions, but deaths also occur in the UK and of course in other places and receive less publicity. All deaths are a tragedy, but by not traveling, do you reduce the number of deaths? Only join a trip if you know, understand, and accept the risks." And we hope as we progress through this series that we can help you keep us safe whilst at the same time enjoying your expedition as much as possible. Thank you for listening to the first chapter. If you did find this beneficial, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we hope to be able to bring you regular content, at least on a weekly basis, and we hope that you benefit from these series. Thank you very much.